Nancy and Benson took a moment to stare at the mortuary coolers that lined the north wall of the dark embalming room. There were 2 rows of 6 coolers, one row atop the other, and their steel doors gleamed dully in the glow from the small LED flashlights they carried. They had broken into one of the town's 2 funeral homes and were using their newly purchased high-end cameras to record their adventure for their YouTube channel. The channel was called The Sinister 2, and the content they produced was of them performing spooky-themed challenges and uploading them to their 500,000 subscribers. Often, they would live stream their shows, but on this occasion, they had chosen only to record and to edit the video to give the most compelling episode possible and upload it later. They were both thrill seekers, and to intensify that thrill, they had decided to leave their phones back at their studio. The idea that things could go sideways and to not be able to call for help was exhilarating. Also, to help give a first-person perspective, they had attached their cameras to lightweight chest harnesses. In addition to their body cameras, they both carried small tablets that shared the software that allowed them to record both audio and video. They had connected their earbuds and lapel mics so that they would be able to communicate when separated. Benson swept the beam of his flashlight around the room. And because they were in the process of illegally breaking and entering, he narrated sotto voce. "We're inside the funeral home, ready to fulfill our challenge to spend the night in a mortuary cooler. As you can see, it's very creepy. We have 2 embalming tables in the center of the room, carts with trays full of embalming instruments, and here we have these 12 mortuary coolers set in the wall. They're used to store dead bodies." Nancy used the camera on her tablet to scan the room. The floor and walls were tiled, with those on the floor being an off-white and the ones on the wall being a muted green color. She made sure to pause for a moment on one of the 2 embalming machines that sat on carts against the west wall. "I find it weird that there are so many of these coolers for such a small town as Nevermore Hollows," she said. "I mean, this is just one of the 2 funeral homes in town, and on top of that, we have a coroner's office that I'm sure has a few dead bodies. Are there this many people in Nevermore Hollows dying or getting killed?" "That's an interesting insight, Nance," Benson replied. He paused for a heartbeat to allow for what he was about to say to be easily edited out of the final video, then said, "I can't believe your ex-boyfriend works here and that he was still stuck on you enough that he would leave the window open so that we could sneak inside." Nancy was girl next door pretty. She knew it but never would acknowledge it out loud. She wasn't one of those prima donna narcissists who tried to use her looks to manipulate people. Besides, she knew that beauty could open doors, but that it took brains to be able to walk confidently through them. She also knew that Benson was self-conscious, even though he was a good-looking guy, and felt that she was too pretty for him, which was just ridiculous. "You don't have anything to worry about when it comes to Pete," she said. "I wish you'd see that. Besides, being nice to him helped us get in here tonight." Pete wasn't just a good-looking guy. He was charming, was an aspiring horror writer, and highly intelligent. He had a cavalier attitude that just oozed cool. Benson was intimidated by that, and therefore he didn't like Pete. Benson and Nancy had started their YouTube channel a year ago when they were only friends and Nancy was still dating Pete. But after a few months, spending so much time together working on the show evolved from a merely creative partnership into a romantic one. And Nancy, being what she called a straight-up girl, refused to act on her blossoming feelings for Benson until she had figured out a way to let Pete down easily. She had decided that the direct way was the best way, and Pete, being the chill dude he was, took it all in stride and was genuinely happy for her. Pete and Nancy were still friendly, and Benson was often cold to Pete because of it. Benson rolled his eyes. I suppose you're right. I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, it's pretty cool what he did for us. This is going to get 1 million views for sure, if not more. Even in the dim glow of their flashlights, Benson could see that Nancy was pleased that he was giving Pete some slack. Nancy slipped back into her narrator mode. She held her camera up to her face so that it was captured on video. Okay, everyone, it's almost midnight, and I'm going to set an additional GoPro camera on a shelf across the room, pointed at the meat coolers. It has a wide lens, and it will not only help capture us crawling inside, but will also prove that we spend the whole night. Now, we are defining spending the whole night as 5 hours, Benson explained. Why are we only staying inside from midnight to 5, Nance? Nancy had just positioned the GoPro on a shelf that contained jars of various solutions. She made sure it was on and said, because we have info that says the owners of this establishment sometimes work late, but rarely after 11 p.m., and usually start their day at 6 a.m. This gives us a nice window to not get caught. Benson gave a playful smile and motioned toward the coolers. Shall we get started? Nancy returned his smile and gave a silly little curtsy. We shall. Pete had chosen 2 coolers for them to use. They were in the bottom row and were beside each other and were the only 2 without bodies currently stored inside. Benson built up the drama and suspense. He grabbed the handle of his cooler and paused. You know, Nance, we didn't think about the possibility of finding bodies in these. Nancy feigned a surprised look. Oh, wow. You know, you're right. Oh, well, we're in it to win it, so let's do it. Benson pulled open the door to an empty cooler. Whew, I'm clear, he whispered. He motioned dramatically at her. Your turn. Nancy had become quite the actor over the past year doing these videos. She knew how to raise the intensity. Her hand hovered over the handle to her cooler. I don't know, Benson. Since yours was empty, the odds are against me. I'm afraid mine will have a body. Benson played it up. Do you want to back out? Nancy bit her lip, pretending to consider. After a heartbeat, she shook her head. No, I'm going to do it. However, she continued to pause for an extra moment. Then she slowly wrapped her fingers around the handle, blew out a steadying puff of breath, and pulled the handle. She slowly peered inside. Empty, she said, as if she were thankful. Ladies first, Benson said. I think this is a good time to let our followers see that we're in no danger of getting stuck inside, Nancy said. She pointed at the inside of the cooler door. See this here? It's a safety handle, just in case someone was put inside that shouldn't be there. Well, that makes me wonder how often that happened before safety handles were installed, Benson said. I never considered that, Nancy replied. The coolers had body-length trays affixed to rollers to make it easier to store and retrieve the cadavers. Nancy pulled out the tray to her cooler and lay atop it. She then grabbed the sides of the opening and pushed herself into the cooler. She looked out at Benson. Get inside yours and we'll shut the doors at the same time. When Benson had gotten himself inside the cooler, he said, I'm ready. On 3, Nancy said. 1, 2, 3. Simultaneously, they pulled the doors closed. The light of their flashlights reflected oddly off the insides of the coolers, causing the shadows around their faces to be more defined. Nancy knew it was going to give the scene a very creepy, dramatic look, so she held her tablet camera up to her face so that their future viewers would be able to see. "Now, what should we do for our fans?" Benson asked. "Well, Nevermore Hollow seems to be a strange town where some very creepy things happen," Nancy said. "What if we tell our listeners some of those stories while we're doing this?" "Yeah," Benson replied. "This is a fantastic idea. Can I go first?" "Sure," Nancy said. "Go for it." "Great," Benson said. "Okay, now I'm going to tell the story about the little boy named Riley Rosedale who got run over by a woman strung out on pills last year, but supposedly returned to seek vengeance on her." "Oh, that's a great one," Nancy said. "Such a spooky and tragic tale." They'd already worked out what stories they would tell, and this one about Riley Rosedale would take roughly 15 minutes. But when Benson was halfway through, they heard noise coming from the room beyond the coolers. It was muffled due to the thick cooler doors, but it was loud enough that they could hear someone humming a familiar melody. I thought Pete said the staff would be gone until 6, Benson whispered. Nancy's heart rate was up. She wasn't scared, just jazzed. The idea that they could now be caught amped up the tension. "Maybe somebody had to come back for something," she replied. "Let's just be careful, and maybe they'll leave in a few minutes. Either way, this is going to be great for our video." Benson smiled. He'd already thought the same thing. Then, playing to the moment, he said, "Nance, do you hear that?" Nancy knew what Benson was doing and played along. "Yes, OMG, someone is out in the embalming room." "Okay, everyone," Benson said, addressing their future viewers. "Here we are, in a funeral home at midnight, stuck inside 2 mortuary coolers, and someone just came into the embalming room. And they are humming a happy song," Nancy added. "And somehow, Benson, that makes it even creepier." They strained to listen, to call to mind the song. It was a sweet, happy melody that was hummed with a deep, rumbling resonance that stood out in sharp contrast to their surroundings. "Hang on, I know what that is," Benson said. "It's the same old song by the Four Tops. Didn't Casey and the Sunshine Band also make a cover of that?" "Yes," Nancy said. "They did. My mom and dad used to listen to it all the time." "Let's switch to the GoPro view and see who it is and what they're doing." "Good idea," Benson responded. As they switched their view, Benson had a sudden alarming thought. "You didn't put the GoPro where it would be easily seen, did you?" "No," Nancy said. "I put it on a shelf between some jars. It won't be easy to spot, unless whoever is in the room decides they need something from that shelf." They both pulled up the GoPro feed on their tablets. "Oh no," Benson hissed. They saw a large man, pushing 7 feet tall. He was thick, muscular, and had a mass of wavy hair. He wore a heavy-duty vinyl apron over a dark suit with a vintage cut, and stood in the stark light of a lamp that descended from the ceiling and hung over a naked body lying on one of the stainless steel embalming tables. The body was that of a female. Nancy used the GoPro app to zoom in on the scene so that both she and Benson could get a better look. The woman was striking with cream-white skin, shoulder-length coppery red hair, and cherry lips. She looked Irish. She was athletically lean, but she looked frail with the strange monster of a man hovering over her. The man continued to hum as he turned his attention to one of the embalming machines that sat on a cart beside the table. He fiddled with a couple dials and then picked up a small hose that was attached to the machine. Both Benson's and Nancy's blood ran cold when they realized that this man was going to perform an embalming. This was not part of their plan. Even though it was upping the intensity of the moment, they knew that they wouldn't be able to show any of this footage. It wasn't only illegal to do so, but would also be in poor taste. Besides, they weren't gore freaks, only playfully macabre. Nancy decided, though, that she could still narrate what was happening for the future viewers. Okay, everyone, to our shock and dismay, a very large, very creepy man has just entered the embalming room with the body of a woman, and it appears that he is going to perform an embalming. Benson was about to weigh in when suddenly the woman's body spasmed, her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at the big man's face as he hovered over her. She looked momentarily confused, then became completely aware of her dire situation. There was a momentary look of fear, and she tried to speak, but was only able to emit a dry cough. The man stopped humming and said,
"Oh dear, you've come awake. I know you must be distressed, but please remain calm."
Though his voice was deep and resonant, it seemed to carry the insight and wonder of a curious man who was new to this world. These qualities did not make him seem like a simpleton, though. In fact, it was quite the contrary. They only served to make him seem more menacing. The woman tried to move, but her body only spasmed again. It was as if she was under the influence of some drug or sedative and was trying to overcome their effects so that she could escape. The woman tried again to speak. This time, she was successful, and her words did have the lilt of an Irish accent. "What's going on? Who are you?" The man's face softened, as if he were about to share some terrible news. Then, calling her by name, he said in a gentle voice,
"Leisha, I regret to inform you that I am the Embalmer."
Leisha's look of shock morphed into hateful rage. "Let me go now, or I swear you'll regret it." The embalmer tilted his head at Leisha's threat. He seemed confused at her stern declaration.
"There's no need to be angry or to make threats. Just relax, and I'll make you pretty."
Leisha scowled at the embalmer. She took in his broad face with his one blue eye and one green eye and his teeth that seemed to not fit correctly in his mouth, as if they belonged to someone else, and said, "You look like a freak. Let me go, or I'll rip your ugly face right off your skull." The man frowned as if his feelings were hurt.
"Those are not nice words, ma'am. No need for mean talk."
"Oh, dear God in heaven, Nancy said as she watched the exchange between the two. "We have to help her." "But how?" Benson asked. He was so scared he felt numb. Getting out of these coolers will be cumbersome, and he could attack us in the process. He heard his words and realized that he sounded weak. He knew that if Pete were here, he'd burst out of this cooler and try to help Alicia. And with self-loathing, Benson chose to remain inside the cooler. "But we can't let him kill her," Nancy replied. The embalming machine had 3 rubber hoses attached. The first was an arterial hose with a sharp cannula on the end that was used to slip into an artery and push embalming fluid into the body. A second hose had a long wand at the end called a trocar that was used to drain internal fluids from the body cavity. A third hose was used for suctioning. While Benson and Nancy lay inside the meat coolers, the embalmer selected the trocar, and they watched in complete horror as he stepped around to the side of the table and placed the sharp end of the trocar half an inch above Leisha's navel. The embalmer gave her a gentle look and said,
I'm afraid this part will be uncomfortable.
He then pushed the tip of the trocar into her stomach. Leisha grunted and let loose with a defiant string of expletives. The embalmer then picked up the arterial hose. The sharp tip of the cannula gleamed in the bright light. He placed his left hand on Leisha's forehead to keep her still. Then he used his right hand to slip the cannula into her carotid artery. Leisha hissed as the cannula pierced her skin. "You bastard! You'll regret this. I'll kill you. I swear. I will." The embalmer gently caressed Leisha's forehead.
So ugly, so angry, but not much longer now, and you'll be at peace.
Leisha spat into his face. He frowned and wiped away the saliva. He shook his head, as if in disbelief of her defiance and vitriol. Then he selected a scalpel from the instrument tray on the cart and leaned over Leisha's exposed legs. Nancy noticed that the embalmer had covered her pubic area with a blue towel, as if he were a gentleman not wanting to cause her any further shame. She also noticed that as he looked down on her long, athletically shaped legs, that his broad face flushed. He glanced up at Leisha.
I regret that you are so exposed, but it is necessary so that I can make an incision, so your blood will drain.
Leisha gave a rage-filled growl. "I hate you, and I hope you burn in hell." The embalmer gently placed his hand on her thigh and pulled her leg apart only enough to gain access to her femoral artery. He made a quick incision and stepped away as Leisha's blood began to flow from her body and onto the stainless steel table. It flowed down a specially designed channel and into a sealed container attached at the foot of the table. He then leaned over and flipped the switch on the embalming machine. Benson and Nancy watched in horror as the yellow embalming fluid slithered through the arterial tube and into her body via the carotid in her neck. Leisha fought at her restraints and screamed in rage and in pain and spat hateful obscenities. But after a couple moments, her eyes drooped and her words began to slur. And after another moment, she slipped into unconsciousness. Nancy's heart hammered as she watched the morbid scene unfold. "We need to escape," she said to Benson. "No, I say we stay here," he replied. He was worried that she could hear the tremble in his voice. He was terrified and ashamed, and he hated Pete for helping them get inside this hellish place. "There's no reason he would find us if we stay quiet. When he's done, we'll get the hell out of here." The embalmer stood over Alicia, watching as the machine pumped the amber fluid into her body. After a long moment, he gently touched her forehead and said,
I need a snack. I'll be back in a bit to check on you.
He then turned and exited the room through a swinging door that led deeper into the funeral home. "Now's our time to escape," Benson said. He popped open the door and slid out as quickly and as quietly as he could. He stepped over and helped Nancy as she slid off her tray. "We need a weapon," she said, "in case he comes back before we're out the window." She glanced around and saw a bone saw sitting on one of the counters. She picked it up, held it with its handle. She glanced at Leisha, knowing there was nothing they could do to save her now. But they could escape and tell the sheriff and have this monster of a man arrested. Benson stepped over to the window through which they had entered the embalming room. Just as he reached to open it, Leisha's body went into convulsions. They froze. Then, drawn by the commotion caused by Leisha's convulsions, the embalmer stepped back into the room. He didn't look surprised at seeing Benson and Nancy, only curious.
Did you come to steal the souls of the dead?
Neither Nancy nor Benson knew how to respond to the embalmer's strange question. Before either of them could answer, hammering came from inside one of the mortuary coolers.
Oh dear. This is not good. It's awake.
As they watched, the door to the cooler next to the one Nancy had occupied rattled, then popped open. A man crawled out. He was lanky, strongly built, and naked. He, too, had fair skin and a shock of curly red hair. He looked around the room, clearly confused, his eyes glassy and red. Benson remembered being at a drug-fueled rave a few months back where the partiers' eyes looked very similar to what this man's looked now. When the man saw Alicia convulsing on the embalming table, he said, "What the hell is going on here?" Upon hearing his voice, Alicia's eyes fluttered open. "Liam," she croaked. "Liam, run." Then her body was racked with another round of convulsions as the embalming fluid flowed through her veins. The embalmer glanced down at Alicia, saw that her convulsions were easing as she slipped from this realm, and took a step toward the man, with his hands held out in a comforting gesture.
I know this looks bad, and you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. But I have to make you dead. Only then can you be at peace.
Liam locked his eyes onto Alicia's corpse, and his face contorted into grief. He fought it, pushed it down, and looked wildly around the room for an escape. His eyes landed on Benson and Nancy and the bone saw that she held in her hand. He correctly understood that they were not with this monster of a man who was threatening death. But he incorrectly assumed that they had been preparing to fight and that they would be his allies. "You monster," he said. "You'll pay for killing my Alicia." He pointed at the embalmer and said, "Get him." The embalmer seemed momentarily confused. Then he turned and saw Benson and Nancy and the bone saw. The embalmer gave a frustrated frown. He mumbled to himself,
"Oh dear, I suppose I have to make all of you pretty."
Nancy and Benson exchanged a confused look at the embalmer's odd statement. Nancy had decided to help Liam, but when she looked into Benson's eyes, she saw that he was not the man she hoped he would be in a moment like this. He was already scanning the room for a way to escape. Other than the window that she and Benson had used to enter the funeral home, there were two exits from this embalming room. One was an open doorway to their right. It led into a dark room that gave them no detail. And the other was the one the embalmer used to enter the room, which presumably led deeper into the funeral home. But the embalmer stood between them and that one, and it seemed too dangerous to try to get around him. Trying to crawl through the window would be too slow and cumbersome. The only other possible way was into the dark room. They had no way to determine where that path may lead them, but from what they knew of the structure of the building, it seemed likely that it would be a receiving room for supplies and would likely have a door that led to the outside. Nancy saw that Liam seemed to read what they were thinking. She could see that he clearly wanted revenge, but understood that he was unlikely to get any help from her or Benson. Then he locked eyes with her, and she felt he was quietly trying to time their escape attempt. The embalmer thoughtfully scratched his chin. Then to Nancy and Benson he said,
"Why are you here? To steal their souls or to save them?"
"Now!" Liam yelled. Liam shot around the embalmer and toward the door that led deeper into the funeral home, but was stopped short when another man blocked his way. Nancy and Benson caught only a glimpse of the new threat as they ran into the dark room. He was much shorter than the embalmer. He was round, balding, dressed in a suit with a 50-year-old cut, and wore glasses. Nancy shot through into the supply room first, and when Benson had got safely through, she slammed the door shut behind them. Nancy switched on her flashlight while Benson grabbed a heavy cart and rolled it in front of the door. Then they took a moment to assess their situation and figure out their next steps. The room was, in fact, a supply room and was filled with extra gurneys and strange machines and sharp instruments on the walls. But to their dismay, there were no doors, no windows, no exits. From the other room, they heard scuffling and grunting. There were two sickening snaps as bones broke and Liam cried out in pain. A tray was knocked over with a crash and a metallic tinkling as embalming instruments were strewn across the floor. There was a gargled curse, sounding as if Liam was being choked, another crackling snap, and he went quiet. Then the embalmer spoke.
"I'm sorry, Otto. I lost control of the situation. There are two other people. I don't know where they came from, but I think they may have been trying to steal their souls."
Otto replied in a quirky, hesitant voice.
No worries, dear Lazarus. Grab hold of poor Liam here. Let's strap him to the table. We can deal with the other two after we start the embalming process on this one.
In the supply room, Nancy turned her light on Benson. "There's no way out. We're trapped. What are we going to do?" Benson shook his head. "I don't know." But then his eyes fell on the instruments on the wall. There was a selection of saws, knives, scalpels, and other sharp instruments. He snatched a thin, curved blade called a bisturi knife, which was like a scalpel but designed for use by embalmers and surgeons for more delicate cuts once a body cavity was open. Benson was disgusted at himself for being a coward back in the meat cooler and allowing that monster to kill the poor woman. He knew that Pete would have been braver, and right then he decided to man up. He would protect Nancy with his last breath. He stepped closer to her. "There isn't much we can do," he said. "So we wait till he opens the door, and then we fight." Nancy wanted to be disgusted at him for his cowardice earlier, but with shame, she realized that she had also been too scared to help the woman. So she decided to give him a break, especially now that he was willing to stand by her side and fight the freaks in the other room. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then they heard movement. It was deliberate, methodical. Then they heard Lazarus say,
"This time I'll strap you down to make sure you don't get up and wander around. We don't need anyone to see you. We could get in a lot of trouble here."
Nancy and Benson exchanged a look. After a moment, Nancy whispered, "I'm scared." They could hear Otto and Lazarus moving around in the other room. They assumed they were tying Liam to the second embalming table. Benson held up the bisturi knife, scrutinized his weapon, and said, "I wish we had a gun." "Me too," Nancy said. "When those two creeps are done tying that guy down, they're going to come in here. And I'm not going down without a fight." From the other room, Otto said,
There we go, all snug. I've got this, Lazarus. Go and take care of our uninvited guests.
They heard Lazarus's heavy footsteps as he walked toward their room. After he took 2 steps, Benson said, "I'm going to fight for you until my last breath." 2 more thuds as the monster of a man stalked closer. Nancy said, "I love you, Benson." 2 more steps. Closer now. Lazarus would step into the room any second. "When he comes in, we hit him with everything we've got," Benson said. "I'll go for his throat. You hack at him with the bone saw." The footsteps paused just beyond the doorway. "Here we go," Nancy said. She lifted her bone saw at the ready. Benson nodded and lifted the bisturi knife and held it with its needle-sharp blade pointed out. "Yeah,"
"I'm going to come inside,"
Lazarus said.
"It will be in your best interest to not resist and just let me do what I need to do."
"Yeah, that's not going to happen, asshat," Nancy replied. "You come in here and we're going to kick your ass." Lazarus turned the doorknob and gave a push. As the door swung open, the cart that Benson had pushed in front of it simply rolled to the side. Then Lazarus stepped into view. His massive shape filled the doorway. He had taken off his suit coat and rolled up the sleeves on his white shirt. There were fresh bloodstains on it.
"Liam made me hurt him. I got his blood on me. Please, let me be gentle with you."
To Nancy's surprise, Benson yelled and shot forward. He slashed the bisturi at Lazarus, but the big man was surprisingly agile. He stepped forward, grabbed Benson's wrist, and twisted. Benson cried out in pain and dropped the knife. Lazarus then grabbed a handful of Benson's shirt and lifted him off his feet. He backed out of the room, leaving Nancy alone. She heard Benson snarl profanities. Then, "I won't let you kill her." Otto, in a raised voice, said,
Child, calm down. There's no need to cause a kerfuffle. This can all be over quickly.
Nancy could hear Benson struggling, resisting. Then she heard him say, "Wait! What the hell is that thing?" Then he fell silent. Suddenly, Nancy heard the hiss and pump of a second embalming machine. Otto said,
Don't be afraid. Everything is going to be okay. And I have to ask, did you sneak into our mortuary to try to free Leisha and Liam?
"What? Free them?" Benson stammered. "No, we snuck in here as a fear challenge. Then we saw this monster embalm that poor girl while she was still alive." Nancy slammed the door shut and tried to find a way to barricade it. As she did, she heard a brief, muted discussion. She couldn't make out any of the details, but after a moment, Benson called out, "Nancy, you've got to see this. Come on out. Hurry." Nancy hesitated. Benson had been in a full-on fight with Lazarus, and now, suddenly, he's calling her to step out there and possibly get embalmed by those weirdos? Something didn't feel right about it. Was it possible that they had subdued Benson and he was now under their control? That didn't make sense. She and Nancy were a couple, and he was always worried about whether Pete was more manly than him. So surely in this situation, he wouldn't just give in to those freaks and willingly put her in danger. There was a knock on the door. "Seriously, Nance, these guys won't hurt us, but you've got to see this." She needed to make sure that he wasn't under their control and leading her out of the room so that she'd be easier to kill. "How do I know you aren't under their control and won't kill me?" He hesitated. Then he said the thing she always told him when he asked if he needed to worry about Pete. "You just have to trust me." Damn, she thought. He isn't wrong. So she mustered up her courage and opened the door, though she felt it prudent to keep the bone saw ready. The door creaked open and she stepped out of the storage room. Benson stood a few feet away. Otto and Lazarus stood between the two embalming tables. Her eyes naturally settled on Alicia's body, and she gasped. Her eyes shot wide. Her mind reeled at what she saw. Leisha's body had morphed from the beautiful Irish woman into that of a 5.5-foot-long cat. This cat thing was lean and lithe with the curves and legs and arms of a human woman, but the face and tail and paws of a feline, all of which was covered in midnight black fur. Lazarus and Otto had gained control of Liam and had strapped him to the second table, and they had started the embalming process. As the amber-colored fluid flowed into his neck through the cannula on the arterial hose, his body was racked with spasms. His back arched, his hands were balled into fists, his toes curled, and his teeth clenched. This carried on for 30 long seconds. Then he collapsed, dead on the table. And to Nancy's awe, Liam's whole body morphed into another one of the cat creatures, like Leisha, except that this one was larger, stronger looking, and clearly male. It, too, was covered in silky, midnight-colored fur. When the metamorphosis was complete, Nancy tore her eyes from the creature and looked at Benson. He was also in a profound state of awe. "When Lazarus pulled me out of the supply closet, he told me to stop fighting and watch, and when I saw it, He trailed off, not able to complete his thought. After a moment, the short, balding man said,
Dear, my name is Otto Lamentation. This here is my brother Lazarus, and we run this establishment that you and your beau have illegally entered.
Hang on. What's going on? Nancy interrupted. What are these things? Lazarus said,
Cat Sith.
Then he gave them a satisfied smile, like you'd see on that of a boy who was showing off a collection of beloved curiosities. To Benson and Nancy, it seemed as if his teeth belonged to someone else. And they noticed his eyes were different colors. What is a cat Sith? Benson asked. Otto politely cleared his throat, as if preparing to give a lengthy exposition. Instead, he succinctly said,
They're magical creatures, originally from Ireland. They rarely leave that Emerald Isle, but somehow these two ended up in Nevermore Hollows. Maybe our cows have better milk.
Then he gave an awkward little chuckle at his lame attempt at levity. Lazarus said,
They steal the souls of the recently dead.
Quite right, my dear brother. Yes, these two have been causing us quite the problem here at our mortuary, sniffing around for souls to steal. But we set a trap and we caught them.
Nancy was profoundly disturbed. But it seems so cruel to embalm them while they're alive. It feels murderous. Otto gave a slight wince at Nancy's accusation.
It's not murder, dear girl. It's war. Plain and simple. If these creatures steal your soul, well, you suffer such terrible, unrelenting pain.
They are very tough. Embalming them is the only way to kill them.
While Nancy considered this information, Benson said, What do you mean by that?
Well, you've heard that cats have 9 lives, yes? These cat Sith creatures are rumored to have many more than that. In my theory, they use the stolen souls as extra lives. I haven't quite worked out how that works yet, but anyway, many years ago, I found that embalming fluid is the only thing that can kill them and keep them dead.
Nancy felt physically and emotionally off balance. The high strangeness of the cat Sith and the Addams family quirkiness of the Lamentation brothers made it difficult to believe her senses. And Otto's answer to her question left her needing more. How in the world did you find out that the only way to kill them was with embalming fluid? Otto said,
Well, by much trial and error, dear.
Then he gave another one of his odd little chuckles. What will you do with the bodies? Benson asked.
Burn them in the crematorium. It gets really hot.
Benson shot the big man a look. He couldn't figure out if he were on the spectrum or not, and decided it was more likely that the Lamentation brothers were simply operating on a different frequency than normal people. Then why not just burn them instead of embalming them? He asked. Otto said,
I tried that, of course, but no matter how hot we got the fire, the bodies never really disintegrated, and they always were revived.
Embalm them first, then burn them. That way they stay dead.
Benson looked at Nancy. He tried to find the words to express what he thought about everything they'd just been told, everything they'd just discovered about the nature of the world. Lazarus saw his struggle and said,
Magics and monsters and evils and demons. The world is full of them.
Well said, brother.
Otto replied. He turned his attention to Nancy and Benson.
As soul-shaking a truth that is, the world is also filled with wonder and whimsy and goodness and heroes.
How come we've never known of this kind of stuff? Benson asked.
Because the modern world is filled with myriad distractions. People can't see it because they don't look for it.
And they don't recognize it when they do see it,
Lazarus added. Nancy glanced at Benson and could read that he was thinking the same thing that she was thinking. So she voiced it for them both. What are you going to do with us? Otto motioned to the door that led deeper into the funeral home.
Would you like some tea?
Benson was confused. Tea? Lazarus rumbled.
It's good. Chamomile.
You're not going to call the sheriff? Benson asked.
Well, of course we are, child. In fact, I called him already, and he should be here any moment. He is a dear friend, and chamomile is his favorite. It seems we have much to discuss, but I'm sure we can come to some arrangement where you two kids don't have to suffer any undue consequences.
It seems you've learned your lesson about sneaking into places that you shouldn't.
Nancy had been struggling to fit this new view of the world into her psyche. She realized that she needed to embrace it or go mad. So she let her old way of thinking slip away, and she asked, Do you have cookies? Otto's face lit up.
Of course. Which do you prefer, oatmeal raisin or chocolate chunk?
At the same time, Benson and Nancy replied, Oatmeal raisin? Lazarus growled.
My favorite.
Otto and Lazarus motioned them along, and Benson and Nancy stepped through the door of the embalming room with a new appreciation for life and an exhilarating understanding of the wonder of the world that is unfortunately hidden to most people because of the myriad distractions of the modern world.